Does George MacIntyre deserve a shot at the starting job? Enrolled at Tennessee in the Polynesian Bowl. You've seen Nico Iamaleava that we thought would just grab this job for 2 years, run on and be the first pick in the NFL draft next season. But that doesn't look to be the case anymore. So, Caleb, does George MacIntyre, the 4-star quarterback from Nashville, deserve an open competition with much ballyhooed NIL star, 5-star quarterback Nico Iamaleava, who was the second highest rated quarterback in the nation? I want to remind you, we're represented by Banks & Jones, Tennessee's trial attorney. We welcome a brand new sponsor to the program, Ted Russell, Lincoln, Knoxville. About to get a Bronco. I'll tell you all about it. But first, does George MacIntyre deserve a shot at the starting job? Today's tough question brought to you by Banks & Jones. Why Banks & Jones? Well, it's because they're Tennessee's trial attorney. You can play to win with Banks & Jones because they'll go to trial. You've heard of other lawyers. They say they'll go to trial and fight for you. They won't. They just want to settle. That's the easiest way out. Well, that's not Banks & Jones, led by T. Scott Jones. They won't settle. They'll go to trial for you. Tennessee's trial attorney. They play to win. Truly, Tennessee's trial attorney when it comes to criminal defense or personal injury. Why settle? It's Banks & Jones. T. Scott Jones. All right, Caleb, let's put the poll question. I'll go ahead and do that now. You tell me what you think. We went over to the 3:45 a.m. production morning, 45 a.m. production meeting, and I told Caleb specifically, don't tell me what you think. I want it fresh on the air. So, does George MacIntyre deserve an open shot to win it like Nico Iamaleava never got in 2023 with Joe Milton? And we know what happened there. You tell me.
Yes, he should. And there's a few reasons why. And I didn't think about this until over the weekend when we had Will West on Friday, and he kind of told us some things about Nico kind of demanding more NIL money. We have learned that Nico's asking for more NIL money. We also know that George MacIntyre would play for less. Mm-hmm. We know Nico hasn't blown anybody away with his play after his first year, myself included. And I would have thrown out the whole team chemistry thing. That's why I said you got to stick with Joe Milton in 2023 and then ease Nico in 2024. But the more I kind of thought about it, I'm like, what type of team chemistry is there? If you're another teammate, Dave, whoever you may be on Tennessee, and you see Nico threatening to transfer for more NIL money, and you're like, but you weren't even that blow away great this past year in the SEC. Isn't that worse for team chemistry, honestly? And I don't know. I would start to think if I were a teammate, like, I understand the quarterback gets paid the most money, but 2022 when Jeremy Banks got jealous of Hendon Hooker for making more money, that was stupid. Hendon Hooker was a Heisman caliber player that year. But in 2024, I would kind of resent Nico having the leverage to ask for more money if I were a teammate, given how not amazing he was in 2024. Does that make sense?
Yes.
And so the team
now, a couple people on the message board, how about Jake Merklinger, who we haven't mentioned yet, and we were going to get to that. I believe, now these are my eyes, covering recruiting for 25 years, and I've certainly been wrong a lot, so don't take it as gospel. But when I watch those two quarterbacks play, I think there is a different level of talent with MacIntyre. Now, Merklinger has a 1-year head start, and I certainly understand that, but let's just open it up. Does Merklinger deserve a shot? Does anybody deserve a shot? The reason I gravitated towards MacIntyre is because I think he's better than Merklinger. Talent-wise, I think Nico's at the top, but not knowing how to call a play, which we have been told was the case in preseason camp, and it was mumbly and nobody knew what they were supposed to run, is not what Tennessee expected when they signed him up for $2 million a year.
Yeah, so Merklinger was just in case Nico gets hurt, they need a backup quarterback. But let's be honest, guys, there's a red flag with Merklinger, which is he couldn't beat out Gaston Moore this past season. So that should tell you all you need to know, that Merklinger was never the guy that they were going to be able to go with long term. I think George MacIntyre was their future after Nico. And so I'm with you. I think George MacIntyre is going to prove himself to be better than Nico. Not Nico, than Merklinger.
I really don't even think those two are close. That's not just me. That's talking to some people in the program, but I don't want to trash Merklinger. I'm trying to be fair.
Right. No, I totally understand.
I mean, some people aren't great as a freshman, and then boom, they hit a level. I mean, Jalen Hyatt went from a guy that didn't work hard enough to the Litnikoff winner. So, I mean, it could happen.
But you should be higher on the depth chart than a walk-on quarterback. Let's be honest.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So I think that's my issue of it. Merklinger. So yeah, it's George MacIntyre. If anybody's going to take Nico's job, it's George MacIntyre. And look, again, there are some win-wins here. You're right. MacIntyre is not, he's going to get NIL money, but he's not going to command as much as Nico's going to command. I don't know. The attitude of George MacIntyre coming in, he seems like he already has more moxie than Nico. Is that fair to say?
Well, moxie or not, I will give him a lot of kudos for this. First of all, you've got more leverage because he's an in-state player, like you said. So it's kind of like saving money in the NFL with a first-year quarterback contract, and you can spend that money elsewhere. You know, he's not going to leave. Let's say he makes $1 million a year, which I don't think he's making that or promised that until he performs at a high level. He's not going to leave to go to North Carolina State for 1.25. I don't think so. I mean, and so there's that. And here's something that always stuck in my craw with the Nico and MacIntyre recruitment. How many times did we hear that MacIntyre was recruiting another player for Tennessee?
Oh, all the time. I mean, we know he went heavy for David Sanders.
All the time. How many times did we hear Nico Iamaleava was recruiting for Tennessee as opposed to slamming the ball around on the volleyball court?
Never.
I didn't hear one guy that he reached out and recruited. Literally.
No. And for context, for those who don't know, Peyton Manning wasn't like George MacIntyre. He wasn't a Tennessee fan growing up, but when he got to Tennessee, he recruited hard for Tennessee during that time.
That's almost as much a part of your job as in recruiting as a quarterback as taking a snap. That's the first step. If you're not out recruiting other guys, it makes me question if you're a bit more of a mercenary than wanting to be a VFL. And I don't know that that's the case with Nico, so don't take that as gospel, but George MacIntyre wants to be able to walk in that stadium 20 years from now and say, we celebrate, Jeff Jarnigan will say, we celebrate George MacIntyre and the fact that he is only one of 5 consensus unanimous All-Americans. That's what he wants. He would rather that happen at Tennessee than anywhere else. Does Nico care as much where it happens? Well, and we reported this on offthehooksports.com, his family wanted more money after he's by far the highest paid player on the team and essentially demanded it. Now, I'm told it's not Nico, that it's a family thing or an agent thing, and that's what they're supposed to do. So this is a business now. But after that, I would be even more apt to open my eyes.
Yeah. And we're going to get to how much of a problem is Nico's family in a little while, because there's a little more there that we got to talk about. It's more his family than him. There's also, you're right. And there's that. And again, I go back to the chemistry factor, because you just talked about people George MacIntyre recruited. Dave, let's be honest. Those kids that he brought in, they're going to be loyal. They're willing to play harder for George MacIntyre, right? Doesn't he strike you as just more of a vocal leader for a team than Nico?
Yeah, I think our view of Nico was this, that he's a calm, cool, collected guy. But now I wonder, is he a little too calm, cool, and collected?
Yeah, it's one of those where, and I've always said this. It always, again, this is why it's exactly the stuff people used to say about Marcus Mariota when my Titans drafted him back in the day. And I just go back to that because they always say, oh, he does what he's told. He does exactly what he's coached to do. I don't want my quarterback doing exactly what he's told and what he's coached to do. I want my quarterback kind of butting heads with the coaches every now and then, right? To say, no, we should do this. And grabbing his team by his throat. Like, I want my quarterback to be an extension. Don't you want your quarterback, Dave, to be like almost another staff member in the room, a film study and debating game plans?
Absolutely. Now, are you always going to get that? Jamarcus Russell, no.
Yeah.
But you hope for that, but that's not always the case. Yes, Peyton Manning, Al Wilson, they were extension. And I mentioned him because he's middle linebacker, and there's some similarities there between playing quarterback. But there's no question that those two positions, but mostly quarterback, you need to be a leader with a voice,
an extension of the coach.
Right. You don't need to be a leader by example. And right now, from everything I've been told, Nico is an incredible leader by example. But is he ready to grab somebody by the shoulder pads and say, do this? I don't know. He wasn't last year, I was told. He needs to be this year.
You know what it reminds me of? It's funny you brought up Al Wilson. You're right, because you need a quarterback who will do this. Fred White used to tell us this story all the time, where during the Florida week, the coaches would always get tense up and they'd be like, oh, don't do this, don't do that. It's Florida week, you got to focus. But apparently every Friday before the games, they would do like a fun scrimmage ahead of time. And the coaches tried to tell them it's 98. The coaches tried to tell them it's Florida week, don't do it. Fred said apparently the defense waved them off. It's like, no, we're doing the scrimmage. We do it every week. You treat it like it every other week. Apparently, Dave, let's be honest. You and I both knew that was probably Al Wilson who was the one who talked to the coaches about that and said, we're doing it no matter what. Well,
I can tell you that Al Wilson determined who played or not on the defensive side. If he went to a coach and said, this guy's dogging it in practice, he just didn't play. Now, a couple of points that I think are really good points on the message board, because I don't want you guys to think we're anti-Nico all of a sudden, because we're not. He is definitely a first-year starter, says Adam. That is very fair. So while we wonder about MacIntyre, while we wonder maybe even, I don't have much wonder about Merklinger, to be honest with you, but while we wonder if Nico is not as good as we thought, he very well could hit light speed and be an incredible quarterback this fall. I don't think that would shock either one of us.
So what you're saying is right now, Nico is the Millennium Falcon in Empire Strikes Back, where the lightspeed hyperdrive is damaged, and they're just having to hide from the Empire.
Yes.
He
is a celestial offensive tackle issue in the rear main shaft.
Yeah, and he needs R2-D2 to come up and fix it. So that is possible. He could get rolling again in 2025. And look, yes, we're judging off 1 year. There were a lot of interior issues. I think here's my issue with Nico. We talked all year, and I thought about this over the weekend, Dave. We talked all year about, the offensive line was a problem, wasn't protecting for him. Sometimes receivers ran wrong routes. He never got a lot of opportunities. But you know what really sticks in my craw when I talk about that stuff?
What is that?
He got $2 million a year, and he didn't get paid $2 million a year to do his job. You get paid $2 million a year to go way above and beyond your job. And I think it's part of doing that is you are supposed to overcompensate for deficiencies, aren't you? As a quarterback, that's kind of the thing as a quarterback. You got to overcompensate for deficiencies, right? If you're that good.
I agree.
And so, no one's going to sit there and say that, if LeBron goes and loses a title, no one's going to say, well, his backup point guard didn't hit this shot, and if he did, they would have won. No, they'd be like, well, LeBron should have won that title. I mean, no one with Michael Jordan was going to be like, well, Luke Longley didn't hit that shot. If he hits that shot on the baseline, they win anyway. It's like, no, they'd be like, yeah, but it's Michael Jordan's team. He's got to go hit that shot and win the title. Nico, it's like you can't say, well, the tackles are blocking. Well, Nico, you're making $2 million a year. I said you were created and allowed to run this system. You should be able to overcompensate for your lack of support, honestly. You should be good enough to do that.
Have no argument with that.